Our program's out with a Pledge of Allegiance and a prayer. Will everyone please stand, and we'll do the pledge together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all who fight for it. Please remain standing for the prayer. Please bow your heads as I lead us in prayer. Heavenly Father, bless this meeting and the people herein, and may our eyes be open and our ears be open so we can all learn and benefit from our time on earth. Thank you. Amen. I'll proceed with the program now. You can take your seats. We start our introductory meeting off with my favorite newspaper article. And I think you'll find this article somewhat unusual. This is an article that came out of my local newspaper. And if you look here, the headline says, "Cheese finally arrives in Anderson." That's Anderson, South Carolina, where I live. Doesn't it seem kind of strange that cheese coming to town makes the headlines? Well, ladies and gentlemen, what kind of cheese is this? This is the free cheese, and this is a story about the free cheese program. But according to this article here, some 3,000 families in my county have government agents coming by handing them free cheese. Well, my wife and I want cheese. We go to the grocery store and pay $3.50 a pound for it. Well, why do these people have cheese brought to them and my wife and I have to pay for ours? The reason is, the difference is we work for a living and these people don't. If you stop and think about it, if the government had any sense, it'd be the other way around. But according to this article here, these 3,000 families receive that amount of cheese in my county. Well, my county has about 20,000 families, so this right here constitutes approximately 1 out of 5 families in my county. Therefore, on election day, when my wife and I go to the polls, 1 out of 5 people standing in line with us get the government cheese. Now, how are these people going to vote? Are they going to vote for the politician that says stop these wasteful giveaway programs? Or are they going to vote for the politician that says more free cheese? Well, how do you think these people are going to vote? This article also talks about the welfare director in my county. He and his fellow bureaucrats sit around in nice air-conditioned offices giving out free cheese. You and I work on some dangerous construction site or some dingy factory, but all these hosts of government bureaucrats have nice cushy jobs. Well, election time comes around, or the massive numbers of federal employees and other government employees, are they going to vote for the politician who says stop these wasteful programs? Or are they going to vote for the politician who says more and more and more? Well, who do you think these people are going to vote for? And this article goes on to talk about why the cheese was given out in that day. What happened was the U.S. Department of Agriculture bought millions of pounds of cheese and put it in warehouses where it's beginning to rot. So the government handed it out. But this cheese sat in refrigerated warehouses for 5 years approximately. Now, why did the man that owned the warehouse let the government keep its cheese there? It's very simple. He was getting paid. Now, why did he keep government cheese there instead of grocery store cheese there? Because the government was paying him more. Well, on election day, who is the businessman that gets the huge government checks going to vote for? Who are all the business people going to support in the elections if they get a government check? Well, when we start talking about business interests support during elections, what are we talking about? We're talking about the greenery. Ladies and gentlemen, during the last election, the politicians spent $500 million on their campaigns, just running for the U.S. Congress. Well, $500 million is a lot of money, and where'd that money come from? Well, how many people in this room have donated $1,000 or more to a political campaign? A lot of people are giving a lot of money to the political candidates, and what do they expect back? Well, under the election law, when people run for the Senate or the House of Representatives in Washington, they have to file with the clerk up there a statement listing their campaign contributions. The newspapers receive copies of this list and publish it. And I have here the list of my congressman's contributions. Very interesting article here. My congressman received early in the year $343,000. That's more than $250,000. And he received that to run for his campaign, and generally he would come up to close to $500,000, $1 million to run for office. The newspapers also report where the political candidate's money come from. It so happens my candidate received more than 3/4 of his money from outside of our district. And more than half of the people that donated money to my congressman didn't know who he was, had never met him. Now, why does a businessman donate $5,000 or $4,000 to a man he doesn't know? The article here points out that this money was donated in some pretty big blocks. Well, let me explain it to you. When a businessman goes to work in the morning, he writes a check out, $5,000 for the rent. Now, what is that? It's the cost of doing business. Then he writes out a check, $5,000 for the utilities. Now, what's that? That's the cost of doing business. Then the businessman writes out a check, $5,000 to the politician. What's that? Is that cost of doing business? Of course it is. A businessman spends money in his business for what purpose? To make more money back. He might write a check for $3,000 for more stock in his store. What does he do? He expects to sell that new material for $3,000 plus a profit for himself. Or he might spend $3,000 for new machinery. Now, if he spends that kind of money, what does he expect? He expects something back plus some. How about the businessman that gives $3,000 to the politician? Well, maybe it's the goodness of his heart. But if the candidates accepted $500 million, what are they going to give back, and who is going to pay that? In the Senate race in California, the two political candidates for the U.S. Senate there spent $15 million and $20 million respectively. That's a lot of money for a U.S. Senate seat. But who's going to pay in the long run for that money that's being spent? This article also talks about why the cheese was sitting in the government warehouses anyway. It so happens that the U.S. Department of Agriculture, with our tax dollars, goes on the open market and buys millions of tons of cheese and wheat and peanuts and all these various crop commodities for one purpose. The purpose is to drive the price up for you and I. Our government is using our money to make you and I pay more for our product. But we have to pay more for the milk for our children because our tax dollars are bidding against us. Our government is not our real friend in this case, is it? There's one interesting story here, and we're talking about subsidy farmers. We all know of a very famous peanut farmer from Plains, Georgia. This peanut farmer ran for U.S. president, and he talked a great deal about his peanut farm. But he was no usual farmer because he had no tractors and he had no fields. Jimmy Carter, in real life, was in the peanut warehouse business. He had a couple of dozen acres of peanut warehouses, and he received millions of dollars a year from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to store peanuts that you and I did not wish to buy in his warehouses. Then, of course, when the peanuts rotted, he ground them up and sold them for fertilizer. But he was not farming the soil, he was farming the taxpayers. But let's look over this article here. We're talking about 5 groups of people. We're talking about the welfare recipients, the government employees, the people that work in business that supply goods and services to the government, and we're also talking about the subsidy farmers and other business interests that receive massive subsidies from our tax dollars. If you add up all these number of people in our society, you find that this comes to more than half. More than half the American people receive their substance from the government. That means on election day, more than half the people who vote receive their substance from the government, and the question is, how are they going to vote? Are they going to vote for where their check comes first, or what's right and what's wrong? Well, what do you think? Ladies and gentlemen, the electoral process has been stolen from us. Now, people often ask, how did this come about? What caused this to take place? Well, let's look at the man that started this, and let's see what he says. This right here is a quotation from a man that we often call fraudulent deficit Roosevelt. And his motto was spend, spend, tax, tax, elect, elect. And that's the purpose of all these welfare programs. If the politicians really cared about people, they'd reach in their own pockets, bring out their money, and give it to the poor folks. But they don't do that. They take from us right and left to give money out to people, and in some cases, as farmers, are very wealthy. The purpose of this, as we can see, is the politicians are looking out for themselves. They just want to go back in office and maintain their positions of power, privilege, and prestige. And also, fraudulent Roosevelt also told us in politics things just don't happen, they're planned. Ladies and gentlemen, I also want to give us a quotation from another president, which I think is a more meaningful quotation. We have here a quotation from one of the greatest men in history. This man is known all over the world. This is George Washington, the father of our country. In one simple sentence, he defined government. He told us that government is not reason, it's not eloquence, it's force. Like fire, it's a dangerous servant and fearful master. He told us that a long time ago, and that quotation has remained good. In my house, I have a nice buck stove, and now that the weather's getting chilly, I'm going to fill it full of some nice dry oak logs and set it on fire. Now stop and think, what do I actually have? I have in the middle of my house a fire. The flames could reach up and set my ceiling on fire, or branch out and set the curtains on fire, and I'd be burned out of my house. So this is an awful situation, except for what? The stove. When you start talking about fire, the question whether fire is going to be your friend, your enemy, depends upon the condition of the stove. Is the stove strong? Does it leak? Is it weak? Well, when we talk about government, we talk about the stove, which is a document called the Constitution of the United States. Everybody turn in introductory bulletins to page 24, and we'll study the Constitution of the United States. You notice this document starts out with 3 words, we the people. What that means, this is our Constitution, it belongs to us. You notice it does not start out with the words, we, the politicians, and the bureaucrats. It's our Constitution. This document has served our country and our people very well for a number of years. I often explain this by asking people, who here knows what's the name of the oldest country on earth? What country has stayed on this earth the longest? It's in existence now. The oldest country on earth is Iceland. What's the second oldest country now in existence with the same system and style of government? It's the United States of America. We've lasted more than 200 years because we have a document which has served us very well. As a matter of fact, a number of other countries have adopted this Constitution or something similar to it. What happens is this system of government is a favorable and stable type of government. Speaking of system of governments, if we looked in the dictionary, what would be the style or the name of our type of government? Well, people often say we are a democracy. Well, the dictionary tells us that in a democracy, all the people vote on all the issues. The ancient Greek city-states were democracies. All the citizens in the whole community would meet in the amphitheater once every 2 or 3 weeks, and they'd vote on the issues. Socrates, one of the greatest philosophers in history, appeared before the General Assembly in Athens. And what happened to him? He was executed. The reason being is, in a democracy, they have but one rule of law, and that's 50% plus 1. Socrates went to court, and he didn't have the votes. And that's all that counts in a democracy, majority rule or mob rule. But in a democracy, you have no rights. You just merely have a chance to have a vote on whether you can live in the community or be driven out. So that's not really our system of government, is it? People often say we are a republic. Well, a republic is defined as representative government. People would elect representatives to represent them. We elect representatives and send them to Columbia, South Carolina, the capital of my state. And while they're down there, can they vote to poison Socrates? Can they vote to take away my property, abolish freedom of religion? No. While our elected representatives in office, They have only the power that's granted to them in a document called the Constitution. They have only the power that's specifically spelled out in there. That's where that power comes from, is the document, and they don't have anything that's not listed in there. So if we really look in a technical sense, the best definition of our type of government is constitutional republic. That's what our system is, and it's very good for us, and it's worked well for other people too.